name is Ellie Davis, and I am a rising junior at Radnor High School, and I am a member of the student group Radnor for Reform, which is a completely student-led organization dedicated to changing the Radnor mascot's name and logo with the goal of fostering an inclusive and welcoming environment in Radnor. For more than a month now, members of our group have been working to change the mascot, and we've been working on this project for the past year, and we've been working more targetedly with the school board for the past month. And hopefully in recent weeks, you have seen some of our handmade signs around town. And today I am joined with Kassandra Ramirez, another rising junior at Radnor High School and a member of Radnor for Reform, to discuss our work and why this change is so necessary. So Kassandra, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. So could you share a little bit about yourself, why you care about this cause, and how you see the mascot as a student in Radnor High School?
Of course. Thank you so much, Ellie. As Ellie said, I'm a rising junior at Radnor High School, and my action in Radnor for Reform is Indigenous student currently studying at Radnor. My family is from Central America of the Nahuatl tribe in Nicaragua and El Salvador. And this tribe also is located with the Uto-Aztecan language, which stretches upon the entirety of Central America and of parts of the northern United States. So that's all about me. And my role in Radnor is I've been a quiet student trying to lay down on the low because, it's sort of difficult not finding others similar towards you. Being in a predominantly white neighborhood in school, it's very difficult to find, again, students like you and that same similar backgrounds. So I really liked when I saw this on social media, actually on Instagram. They did a wonderful job promoting, and I commented, and that's when they immediately were like, yeah, you can join us and you can fight for the cause together. So I thought it was really great that I could put my voice and put forward what my family has taught me and their values in fighting against cultural appropriation that Radnor has done with the mascot and name.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing. Could you talk a little bit about how having the Raider mascot at Radnor High School has affected your educational experience and how you see the mascot?
Yeah, of course. During my stay at Radnor, since I've been in the school district since kindergarten, I never really realized the nuances of the actual mascot and name and how it directly appropriated my culture and my family. As I was never, I at the time I was still very young and ignorant to the cause. But as I grew older into middle school, there are more involvements with sports, and I noticed that there's this huge Native American head on as a mascot. And that's when it put together two and two. That's like, this is a school that throughout my years of kindergarten through middle school at this point, never taught they taught the glorified history of America, and not in a way that actually pinpointed the actual struggles that Native Americans gone through. And I felt that this association, or rather dissonance between the education system and the mascot, really does not make any correlation at all. And it's giving the students a image that Native Americans can be put as an imagery and dehumanizing to just a mascot, and not as a whole people and culture that flourishes and that were genocide in the whole entire history of America that they just did not teach.
Yeah, and that's a very important point, and that's definitely a core value that's central to our organization is the concern that Radnor High School, as you said, the dissonance between having this mascot and leading the students to think that current Indigenous people, having that association with the term Raider, they form that association while also not having any proper curriculum in place that thoroughly talks about the history of the Native people in our community and the history of how they have the pain that they went through over the course of the past few hundred years. We can't have the mascot that misleads our impression when we don't have any factual curriculum that's telling us the actual history. So thank you for raising that point. Um, as some of the viewers may know, on August 4th, we were very happy that we got to share our perspective with the school board directly. The school board hosted a special meeting to talk specifically about the issue of the mascot, and they allowed for the community to submit public comments. And according to Mr. Petiti, more than 130 public comments were submitted. So we absolutely loved hearing the support from all the community members about how they feel like they need to change the mascot. But the other part of that is we were very happy to hear some of the concerns from the community members about changing the mascot. So I have some things that I would like to address that I know that people said were concerning to them about changing the mascot. But Kassandra, if you want to talk about what your impressions were of the meeting, how you think it went, and if you want to respond to any specific comments.
All right. So I'll first talk about how the board directing meeting went and the actual association with the student teachers and of course faculty members and all the board members. I like to say thank you for listening out during these unprecedented times. I know they have a lot on their plate. And I applaud them for that. However, I love how they listen to us. However, I wish that they gave us a bit more lenience in presentation, because at first I think they said that we weren't allowed to present and then they started presenting. So I just thought that we could have formed a sort of more, I guess, communication with that. But loved how they allowed public comments and letting us speak, and how we were able to do it over Zoom with all the technological issues and all that. So this is my take for the first portion of it.
Yeah, I know. We definitely would have liked to been able to I specifically present a little more on what plans we propose in some documents that we released our open letter, which we'll share more information about later. So we would have loved to give some more information on that, because 3 minutes, even in combination with all of our public comments, 3 minutes is not a lot. So we look forward to sharing more with the school board members in the future. One concern that I heard a few people who don't see any problem with the mascot, they shared that some alumni felt that we were telling them that they were bad people for supporting this mascot, and that we were attacking them personally rather than attacking what the mascot stands for. So I think an important part of our organization is that all of us are Radnor students ourselves. Most of us have been to these football games. We've performed the tomahawk chop ourselves. We've worn this Raider merchandise with feathers and Native American heads. We've played for Radnor sports teams. So there's no way that we can accuse anyone of being a bad person for supporting this mascot, because we've done it ourselves. And part of that is we haven't been given the proper education to realize that to realize the harm that this mascot is causing. So we can't tell anyone that they're bad people, but I think rather we feel that the mascot in itself and what it stands for is bad, and by supporting it, we're causing harm. And whether that comes from a place of ignorance, of not being aware, it doesn't mean that anyone is a bad person. And what we can do is that we can recognize the harm that this mascot has caused, and we can move past it. We can change the mascot, and we can complete this transition together to better our community. But again, that does not mean that anyone is a bad person, because if anyone has erred for supporting the mascot, then we have done that ourselves. So we cannot call anyone a bad person for supporting this mascot. So that's the comment that I wanted to respond to. Kassandra, I think another really common comment at that meeting was that there are more important things for us to be focusing on right now, like getting back to school. So if you want to respond to that comment or any other comments that you heard at the meeting, we'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, of course. I think what you said exactly precisely is what most Radnor students feel, that this change is unnecessary. I feel like that correlation between us attacking them and saying that, or thinking that we're attacking them and saying that they're bad people, can correlate with the theory that they might not, the ignorance, and they might not understand the exact cultural nuances that this mascot pertains to. And of course, there's also the flip side where they think that there's more important issues to tackle at hand, especially with COVID and the whole pandemic going on. I feel like with the school board, they work so hard that they could juggle both at the same time. And I think that this matter can be boiled down to something much simpler as just taking action or whoever they decide to choose. It really, I think, just the action of changing it or not really shows that it can just be something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be blown out like such a way that they feel that it's not enough time for both going back to school and changing this mascot. I feel that they are of course working so hard, but this issue, not to simple it down, but it can honestly be tackled at the same time as opening schools and the sports. And of course, all that can boil down to just changing it or not. But to tackle another issue at hand, I think that ignorance and going back to what you said about the students, it's also education wise. And I think we can take this time or in the future, we can use this action to change some stuff up and maybe unteach the ignorance and unteach some of the ideals that Radnor so speaks on and make it something more beautiful and flourish and make it, like they say about losing the Raider culture by changing the mascot. We can change that culture and make it into something more beautiful with cultural awareness and bringing different ethnicities into our learning and educational curriculums. I think that's something we can move on to.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, how we should be able to do both of these things at the same time. I completely agree. Changing the mascot and going back to school and focusing on bigger issues don't have to be mutually exclusive. And the other thing I want to add to that is that if the mascot shouldn't be such a big deal as a lot of people have been saying, then it shouldn't be such a big deal to change it. We recognize that there are so many other pressing issues that are facing our school district, returning to school, working on bigger issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, introducing that curriculum that can actually honor the Native American tribes of our area. We, as an organization, really want to move on to those bigger issues. So, what we want to do is we want to tackle this little issue and move on past that so that we can focus on some of the bigger issues. And we all have to set our priorities of issues that we want to focus on. And right now, this is our priority because we think that this is a vital initial step to going on towards those bigger issues. And if Radnor can't even tackle this smaller issue, this small issue that there shouldn't even be a debate around because this is a pressing moral issue, then how are we supposed to move on and tackle some of those bigger problems of having better inclusion in our school district as a whole? So thank you for those comments, Kassandra. The other comments that we've heard really commonly is the comment that there are no specific students in Radnor that are Native American that are offended by this mascot. So if you could talk to, first of all, just the flawed nature of this logic. I know you have something to say about this, so please go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So I do understand that comment that not many people in Radnor think that there's many Native Americans that will actually be offended on that. And because they don't think that it becomes so close in their own tight knit society and in their own community, they think that we could pull some like I know the study comes up a lot where it's like, oh, this percentage of Native Americans aren't offended by the mascots with Native imagery in it. And I think that those sort of researches and studies are flawed in a way that it doesn't really pinpoint the actual issues, but it's just something to be thrown out there for statistic purposes, not rather of the cultural nuances or the actual individuality of each different tribe in Native American and in America and within Indigenous peoples in Central America and all around the stretches of the Americas. And this is also an issue because I know within Native communities, there's a lot of debates between individuality and collectivism. And because we have so many different federal tribes and non-federal tribes that are recognized, that this sort of convolence of all the different types of tribes being put into one stereotype is very detrimental to every single Native American because there's so many different tribes and so many different cultural nuances and aspects in each tribe and religional aspects that's just sort of unfair to be just treated as just one homogamous individual mascot. And I think that is where it draws a line between who exactly has what say in what makes this offensive or not. And I feel like for each person, I personally am one that is not as close to my connection with Indigenous people because I moved here at Radnor since I was born, and our family doesn't have the means to keep traveling back and forth to our family that actually live in Nicaragua and El Salvador. And we just don't have that connection due to financial means. But I love to learn about the history and I love to be involved with my family and their own cultural stuff that we do. And I like to say that I'm I'm one of the few Native American Indigenous people at Radnor, and I am offended of this cultural appropriation of the mascot. So just letting you know that we are here, even though our voice is tiny and not as many people in this community. We are here and would like to see change, and I'm pushing for change because, of course, my family over there in Nicaragua and El Salvador will also be proud to see them fighting for this.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Washington Post poll that I just have to say, that poll done in 2016 that says that 90% of Native American people in the United States are not offended by the Native mascots. That poll was conducted over the internet, and it did not confirm the ethnicities of the people who were taking the poll. So any person who isn't enrolled in a tribe, who hasn't grown up a part of the Native American culture could have said, I am part Native American, I'm 1/32 Native American, and I'm not offended by this. So they didn't confirm the identities of the people taking the poll. There have been other polls since that discredit the findings of that poll by the Washington Post in 2016. So I just had to point that out. And then two more points about how people say there aren't any Native American people in Radnor that are offended by this. The one thing is that it's not just the Native American students that are harmed by this mascot. The American Psychological Association's study from 2006 does a wonderful job talking about how non-Native students are also harmed by this imagery because when they grow up in a community that has this stereotypical image as a mascot, they are taught that it's okay to stereotype these people and place them in a box. So it's harmful to all of us. And the other piece of that is Radnor's mascot affects people outside of Radnor. You see all of these individual school districts making national news when they change their mascot, and Radnor is no different because we have the ability to set a precedent outside of Radnor and give an example that we to other school districts that this change is possible. So we have impacts, the mascot has impacts outside of Radnor. Maybe a final point that if we get rid of that. So Kassandra, do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Oh, of course, yes. Going back to your point that Radnor and this change can push for more of an national issue and push for change to other schools is very important because as I'm sure that Radnor takes pride in being one of the best national schools. I think that they were awarded back in the years. And of course, they got lots of designations for No Place for Hate. They have so many different awards for being a top school. And I feel like because of this top school, we can bring so much change to other schools that also bring Native or offensive mascots and names, and the association between a mascot and the name of the school really shows different type of people and how the school district um, handles these type of issues with race and equity and equality. Of course, we want to also not be only the best in sports, in academics, but also in cultural and diversity in the school, and how we push for that moral ground. And I think that with pushing on for change, we can also include more diversity in the curriculum. I think that's another big thing for education wise. We can bring more authors from Native cultures and from all the Indigenous people rather than just reading firsthand accounts from other Western media and Western literature that we often read in school. We don't get the full picture, but more of a Eurocentric type of manner that we don't really get to see how the natives act. So because we don't get to see their actual psychology and their philosophies, we often pin them to be more of the savages in the history because of the way they teach it. And I think that going back to the name and why we need to change is the raider name, if you know by definition, is someone who steals and someone who raids, of course. But I think by having this mascot and having the name, and on top of that, the curriculum that only shows one side of the Eurocentric point of view will really pin the stereotype of rating and the native with more of that harmful stereotype of being savage, when in history, if we teach correctly, we know that they were far from that. So I really think that we can make that disconnection and we can make this school even greater with diversity and bring more designation for bringing this change to the mascot.
Yeah, and I love how you brought up how it's the combination of those three different factors that makes the mascot particularly harmful. And going back to the idea of how it's important to uphold tradition, this was a great point that I heard from Donna Fan Boyle, who is a founder of the Coalition of Natives and Allies. She said that her response to when people claim that this mascot is a 60-year-old tradition, the image, I believe, in Radnor, that tradition should not be weighed more heavily than the tradition of the actual native people in our country for thousands of years. These cultural symbols, the tomahawk, the feather headdresses, all of these symbols are actual traditions that we're disrespecting, and those traditions go back thousands of years, and we're misrepresenting them by pairing it with the name Raider and the idea of this savage that you brought up. So our tradition of misrepresenting them should not outweigh their actual cultural traditions that existed long before us. And Kassandra, with your last remarks, you brought up a great point about the interaction of the mascot and the imagery. So one of the greatest debates surrounding this issue is whether we need to get rid of the name and the imagery, or if getting rid of the imagery would be enough, keeping the name Raider and maybe having a new image. So could you talk a little bit about why it's important to, why it's not going to be enough to just get rid of the imagery, why we also need to completely rebrand and change that name Raider?
Of course, yeah. Like I said before, the different combinations of the lack of education and, of course, the imagery going back from the years prior, bringing the name into it too, just puts falsely objectifies and stereotypes natives into this mold of raider. And I think there's a lot of debate going like that, like you say, but it's very important to disassociate both of them because from the years prior, we know that we had a full native mascot. We had the whole entire bobblehead come out and the whole entire red raider. And because of the history of Radnor, it will always be associated with Native American history. As we see, they tried to change and the bobblehead, and that didn't work. It still has native imagery, and I think it's important to change that for the better and to dislocate the ideals and harmful stereotypes towards Native students.
Yeah, and that's a great point that the association will remain. And I've been fortunate enough to get to talk to different groups working across the country to change local Native American mascots. And a point that some of them have raised is that, we kept the name Raider, we kept the name Warrior, we just got rid of the imagery. We did that 10 years ago, but now the imagery has been reintroduced. So if we don't completely change, we don't completely rebrand ourselves, we're going to leave the possibility open that the Native American imagery could be reintroduced in the future. So changing the imagery is just not going to be enough. So Kassandra, we're almost out of time, but do you want to share a final remark about how your message to the school board, what message will they be sending if they choose not to act versus the message they will be sending if they do choose to act?
I think that the action of them changing it will bring so much opportunity for Radnor to grow as a school and bring more inclusion and welcome society and community into the Radnor. Of course, if not changing it, it will also bring the connotation that Radnor doesn't really care about their diversity and equality statement, and it's rather more of a performative action than it is truthfully and how they feel deeply and sincerely about it. Uh, for me, in Radnor, I have witnessed, like I said in my comment, racism, stereotypes, profiling, and colorism throughout communities of Radnor students and teachers. And I feel like that itself will show that if the school doesn't change it, then they're letting all these things that I witnessed, experienced, and brought the attention to just slide under the rug and not really facing the issues at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel like if they choose not to act, they're going to be sending a message that the students' voices don't matter, because I think the students truly shared their opinions, shared where they stand at that board meeting. So I hope that the school board will choose to act. They will validate the students for speaking up and show that they do truly value the student perspective. So thank you so much, Kassandra, for sharing your story and talking with me today. For all the listeners out there, looking forward. After hearing public comment last Tuesday, the school board has scheduled a meeting on August 19th at 4 p.m. to discuss the issue of the mascot among themselves. And to listen to that meeting, you can watch it live on Radnor Township School District, their YouTube channel. If you would like to learn more about our organization, Radnor for Reform, you can visit our website or our Instagram and Facebook pages. Both pages are at Radnor FOR Reform. And if you would like to support the effort to retire the Raider, you can sign our open letter to the school board, which can be found on our website and on our Instagram profile. And if you want a yard sign, you can also message us on Instagram. We have a few extras, so we're looking to get those out into the neighborhood. So we're looking forward to hearing the school board discussion on August 19th. And thank you once again, Kassandra, for taking the time to talk with me today and sharing your story and experience in Radnor. So we look forward to making change and seeing our progress as a school district. Thank you.